In a small room by the sea, Mr. 1614 Alex, an experienced fisherman, sat in front of a cup of hot tea. The wrinkles on his face are like a map of years spent traveling at sea. He slowly began to tell the story of a journey to sea, a trip he would never forget. The first sunlight of the new day shines on the crowded fishing port. The sound of the engine starting up rang out, mixed with the calls of the fishermen. Large fishing ships are anchored on the shore. On the deck, a group of workers were busy checking the equipment. Every time the sun peeks over the horizon, that's when we start preparing for the trip to sea. Every cable, every hook must be carefully checked. At sea, any mistakes either way can lead to disaster. A young fisherman, looking about 20 years old, attentively examined each fishing net. Mr. Alex passed by, patted him on the shoulder, his eyes full of experience and seriousness. We don't just test equipment. We also have to be mentally ready. Big waves, sudden storms. Anything can happen. Before the ship left the dock, the fishermen gathered in a circle. They pray for a safe trip, a safe return, and a good catch of fish. We put our faith in the sea, in the protection of our ancestors. Each trip is a challenge, but also an opportunity to prove the bravery of fishermen. The ship slowly left the harbor, heading out to sea. The sound of waves crashing against the side of the ship, the sound of the wind whistling through my ears. The sun had risen high, illuminating the entire vast sea surface. On the train, everyone started their work. Every time the ship leaves the dock, the feeling in my heart is always a mixture of excitement and anxiety. For new people, it is a wonderful experience. But for those who have gone through many trips, they know that the sea is never easy. A fisherman stood on the deck, looking intently into the distance, while others used modern equipment to search for signs of tuna schools. A moment later, Mr. Lamb called out, pointing forward. There, a flock of seagulls were flying, signaling the presence of fish. To catch tuna, we don't just rely on luck. We observe ocean waves, follow flocks of birds, and use modern equipment to identify areas where fish are present. When discovering a school of fish, the boat quickly changed direction. Everyone is prepared. The net was dropped into the sea, and the large tuna struggled violently as they were pulled onto the deck. Sweat was pouring down on the fishermen's faces, but their smiles were full of satisfaction when each huge tuna was caught. Every time we see the net filled with fish, that's when we know that all our efforts have paid off. But the work doesn't stop there. We have to act quickly to maintain the quality of the fish. After catching the fish, the fishermen begin processing right on the deck. The tuna are cleaned, cut into parts, and stored in a freezer. Processing fish on board is essential to ensure quality. We have to work quickly, but carefully, to keep the fish fresh until it reaches shore. Another fisherman carefully put each portion of processed tuna into freezer boxes. Modern cold storage system helps fish always maintain freshness, ready for further processing. When the sea is full of dangers, properly preserving fish is vital. Modern refrigeration equipment has helped us preserve tuna better, maintaining the highest quality when it reaches consumers. Use The ship returns to the port. Each box of fresh tuna is transferred from the ship to the wharf, then immediately transported to the processing factory. Inside the factory, the atmosphere is bustling with the sound of machines and rows of conveyor belts constantly operating. After a long and challenging journey, Mr. Tour 67, Alex returned home. His family is waiting for him with smiles and warm embraces. He looked back on the past journey and was proud of what he and his team had accomplished. His tireless efforts bore fruit, and he knew that he would continue this journey because it was his life and his passion. Workers in protective clothing stand along the production line. The tuna is cleaned, the unused parts are removed, and goes through a heat treatment process to remove bacteria. All steps take place in a sterile environment, ensuring food safety standards. Every step of processing must be done carefully and precisely. From cutting off unused parts to heat treatment, everything is aimed at ensuring the final product is of the best quality. After being processed, tuna will be canned in tin, airtight boxes. A series of fish boxes are neatly stacked on the conveyor belt, ready for the labeling and packaging process. We can our tuna in a sterile environment, ensuring that the product reaches consumers with the freshest flavor. Boxes of canned tuna are stacked on top of each other, preparing for distribution everywhere. Transport trucks leave the factory, taking products to all regions. Seeing boxes of canned tuna being distributed, I feel so proud. It's not only the efforts of the seafarers, but also the entire perfect processing process. After a long journey, Mr. Rutty 4097, Alex returned home where his family was waiting. Mr. Alex looked out at the sea from his window, recalling the past days. He understands that the sea is never easy, but it is always worth it. He will continue to go out to sea because it is his pride, his life, and that of other fishermen. The vast sea is not only a source of life, but also a harsh challenge for fishermen. Mr. Peter, an experienced captain, has gone to sea countless times, facing challenges of nature to bring back fresh products from the ocean. His story about the process of hunting, processing, and barreling squid and octopus will take us on an emotional journey where the sea is not only a workplace, but also a great teacher. In the bright dawn, when the first rays of sunlight began to illuminate the sea, Mr. Peter stood on the deck, feeling the salty sea breeze passing over his skin. This is a peaceful moment before starting a long trip. Mr. Peter turned back to look at his team of fishermen who have worked with him for a long time. On deck, they were checking equipment, anchoring, and checking each net, ready for the journey. Every time we go out to sea, we not only face the uncertainty of the sea, but also have to carefully prepare every smallest detail. With just one small mistake, the trip can turn into a disaster. Mr. Peter shared, the young fishermen, under the guidance of their predecessors, carefully inspected each net, each anchor, and the necessary tools to catch squid and octopus. Mr. Peter's meticulous instructions reflect not only his experience, but also his care for each person in his team. The sun had risen high, illuminating the entire vast sea surface. The fishing boats slowly entered the deep sea, which is known to be home to large squids and octopuses. On the deck, the fishermen began to set nets and traps, preparing for hunting. Squid and octopus are valuable seafood species, but hunting them is not simple. Mr. Peter and the fishermen relied on many years of experience and modern equipment such as navigation systems and sonar to determine the location of schools of squid and octopus on the seabed. To catch squid and octopus, we not only rely on experience, but also luck. Modern equipment such as navigation systems and sonar help us determine the location of squid schools and octopus at the bottom of the sea. Squid fishing nets are released into the sea. Long and wide nets are stretched underwater, ready to catch squids swimming by. When the net is full, the fishermen pull it up together. Big squids with shiny skin were pulled onto the deck amid shouts of joy. Octopuses often live in the deep sea and hide in rock crevices. To catch them, fishermen use special traps designed to attract octopuses. When the trap was pulled up, the octopuses with their long tentacles were trying to crawl out of the net, but were eventually pulled onto the deck by the fishermen. Every time the net is filled with squid and octopus, a feeling of satisfaction spreads. But it's important to process it right on board to ensure quality. Mr. Peter said, after catching squid and octopus, processing them right on the boat is extremely important. The fishermen quickly got to work cleaning it, removing the unused portion and cutting it into small pieces. The work is done with precision and agility to ensure the freshness of the seafood. We have to work quickly but carefully. Each squid, each octopus is carefully processed to ensure that when it reaches the consumer, it still retains the fresh taste of the sea. Mr. Peter emphasized, after processing, squid and octopus are placed in cold storage containers right on the ship. Modern freezing systems help keep seafood fresh, ready for the next processing steps when the ship docks. This is an important stage to maintain the quality of the squid and octopus. Without a modern cold storage system, the seafood may spoil before we return to the mainland. After the ship arrives at the port, boxes of fresh squid and octopus are transported immediately to the processing factory. The atmosphere at the factory is always bustling, with the sound of machinery and the busyness of workers. The squid and octopus are fed into the processing line, where they are treated in a sterile environment. We have to ensure that each squid, each octopus is processed properly, from cleaning, cutting into parts to packaging. Mr. Peter explained. Squid and octopus are cut into small pieces, then heat treated to remove bacteria and maintain freshness. The seafood pieces are then packaged in sealed containers, ready for labeling and distribution. Every carton of squid and octopus that leaves the factory must meet the highest standards. We pack the cartons in a sterile environment to ensure that when they reach consumers, the seafood still retains the same flavor and quality. When first caught, the boxes of squid and octopus have been carefully processed and packaged, ready to be distributed everywhere. Transport trucks leave the factory, delivering products to supermarkets, restaurants, and consumers across the country. When I see boxes of seafood being distributed. I feel so proud. It is the result of tireless efforts, from the time we go out to sea to hunt until the time of processing and packaging. Every squid, each octopus carries the flavor of the sea, and we want to share that with everyone. Mr. Peter shared. Finally, after a long journey, Mr. Right arrived. Peter returned home. His family is waiting for him with a warm meal. Stories about the sea and past trips will be told, inspiring the next generations. He knows that what he does is not only a profession, but also a tradition, a pride that he wants to pass on to his children and grandchildren. Mr. Peter's story is not only about a journey to sea, but also about passion, dedication, and love for the sea. Through every step of hunting, processing, and packaging squid and octopus, he shares a part of the ocean with everyone, preserving the natural flavor and quality of each product. It is a story about the tireless efforts and pride of the fishermen.